Lost Cause. Well, this is one of those States of Siege games that were pretty popular in the mid 2000s, mid to late 2000s. This is from Victory Point Games, a company that's no longer in existence. But I got a copy of this. I haven't played it really since it first came out. It's been quite some time, at least 12 years, I think, since I played it. Dug it out of storage and wanted to get it back on the table again. These were coming out so fast and furious at the time. It was like every month there was a new States of Siege game, and so I really didn't get this one much of a chance to sink my teeth into it. But where some of those games are super simple, games like Arab-Israeli War, was it Arab-Israeli War, Israeli Independence, something like that. Super simple. You draw a card off the deck, you resolve it, and you're given a couple choices of what you can do in response, and that was it. This one has a lot happening, more than I remember. Now, recently, Worthington Games has been remaking some of these that were originally Victory Point game titles. So they've just put out Malta Besieged and Soviet Dawn. I think they did a remake of that too. I didn't pick that one up, but I think they did that one as well. So basically I'm playing through, this is the advanced game, and so I'm going to play through this guy, and we've just finished up 1861. Finished off pretty well. Now Army of Tennessee is active, Army of Cumberland is active, and the Army of Potomac was decisively defeated at Fredericksburg, forced to retreat back to Manassas. I was fortunate to have Bragg replace who was it? An incompetent general by the name of Polk. That's who it was, Polk, who I think is a little unfairly rated in this game, but at any rate, got him replaced with Lee, and so I think we're in pretty good shape for the 1862 turn, so we'll have to see how things go. Well, the sequence of play is very simple. In Lost Cause, you simply reveal one of the cards off the deck, and then you execute it from top to bottom. Now, this particular card is one of three cards only used in the advanced game. This is a, what they call a title card or a broad title card. Anyways, banner card. These guys here have an effect that doesn't move armies around and basically either cause you to get advantage or, in the case of this particular one, cause a disadvantage. During the next month, when you resolve that month, that headline card, when it's revealed, all Confederate circular actions are treated as square actions, and all square actions are canceled. The arrow actions are unaffected. So this gets resolved in that fashion, and we simply add it now to the next year's pile of cards. So 1863 card is being assembled here. At least 4 cards from 1861 ended up getting packed into the 1862 deck. We only picked 12 of them. They got shuffled up pretty thoroughly, and then 12 cards make up the deck for this year. So 1862 is going to be interesting. That is a really slick randomizer, I think, for this versus other States of Siege games. Ooh, this is a good. Well, we've got all of the special cards for the advanced game in play now. So this one here, I get to set it aside. And last time it worked out good for me. This one's more or less neutral. It can either be really good or really bad for you. Next time you fight a battle, if you roll an unresolved, or excuse me, unmodified 1 or unmodified 6, it'll either improve or degrade your morale. And so last time I got a decisive victory, and that helped our morale out. So that will be it for that. We'll hold on to that as a reminder. All right, now we go. This is an 1861 card getting resolved a little bit later than historic. This is Winfield Scott proposes Anaconda Plan. The rebels are going to capture the Norfolk Navy Yard, and they're going to do a number of actions. So we'll work through this in our next segment. All right, so to work through the card, what we're going to do is we're going to resolve it from top to bottom, left to right. So we're going to look at the symbols. The little triangle tells us we need to look at a new army coming into existence if it's not already on the map. Currently, the only one that's not on the map is the Army of the Gulf. So any kind of orange track instructions for the Army of the Gulf are simply ignored at the present time. We do have the Army of the James in play, and so that is located right up here at Norfolk. If it was not in play, it would be put into play on the triangular space at this time, hence the triangular symbol there. Next, we have a square symbol for the Green Army, which is the Army of the Cumberland. So this is a game that uses symbols and colors pretty intensively. So if you're colorblind, it might be a little more challenging, I suppose. But at any rate, this is the Army of the Cumberland. It's going to do a square action. What that means is I've got to dice against the number in the black box there. I got to dice and roll higher than a 3 in order for that to activate and perform its functions. To modify it, we look at the black number on the Army commander for the West in the Union. And Halleck, who has replaced Fremont had a -1. So that would mean that Army of Cumberland would only activate on a 5 or 6. Now he activates on a 4, 5, or 6. So I'm going to roll a die, and we roll a 6. So he is going to move. And there is a whole thing that you work through on here to find out what he does. I'm just going to shorten it by saying he moves here. He just advances to the next track. He does not follow these white dash tracks because that's just to mark a strategic location, and it's just to mark adjacency. This particular strategic location is adjacent to 3 locations. When they are all Union controlled, the special ability of that location ceases to function. And so that is that. Next, we have the Army of the James is going to do a square action themselves, but it's deferred. The dark red border means we don't resolve it now. We'll wait until the end of the turn, so we'll just mark it with a marker for now. All right, the next thing we're going to do after we've worked through the sequence up here, we do a blockade action. That's a naval action. Look at the track here. If there is any marker on the naval blockade marker, which is an incredibly hard to read marker. It says open in very difficult to read red print. They tried to be too artsy, Victory Point Games. This would have been better served having, you got this big 1-inch marker. Maybe you could, make it readable. I don't know. Anyways, anyone that remakes these, please make the stuff readable. The artsy stuff is cool when you can do it, but gee whiz, we'd rather be able to read the content and make it playable. So what we're going to do is look at the play aid, and this walks us through what our priority is. First, they will combat an ironclad if it's located there. To do that, basically you got to roll a 3 or higher to defeat the ironclad. If it's defeated, then that's it. Next thing you're going to do is remove a coastal fortification if that's the marker located on the blockade marker on the track. If that's not the case, then we advance this 1 space. Now, what does that do to the player? Once it reaches this space, you're going to lose a morale point. All these tattered flags mean a loss of morale. And when this reaches 0, you lose the game. The game is over at that point. The other thing that happens is to gain resources, you need to roll a die higher than the position of that marker. So if you do a resource action, now I go from needing a 2 or higher to a 3 or higher in order to get a resource into the available resources. Of course, I have to do a naval action in order to get stuff from here onto that marker. And the only thing right now I could put there is the Commerce Raiders asset. So that will be the end of their card play. And now it'll be up to us for our decisions. So the next thing we're going to do is our part of the card. We're going to look at the resources line. It says war effort, draw. That means that's special. That means I don't have to dice higher than the position of the blockade marker. I simply draw from a randomized cup. And let's see, we got hopefully an ironclad. Nope, we got coastal forts, which is handy. I'd like to be able to do a naval action and put that onto the blockade marker. But for now, it simply goes into our pool of available resources. All right, the next thing we do is a naval action. Well, that's handy. So I will actually take that marker out of the available supply and place it onto the blockade. So I didn't have to dice for that because that was an automatic success action. The arrow indicating it's automatically successful. Now the square marker means I have to dice in order to do one of a variety of commands, and those are located on this, actually it's going to be on here, the advanced game. Here's my command options. I got a whole bunch of different things I can do, but remember the text of the special card we drew earlier. Basically, the square feature on this card was nullified, so I don't get that. I lost that opportunity. Had I had it, it would have been useful to activate Lee. Rolling a 2 or higher would activate him because of the 1 in the black box. I could then issue a battle order with him. I get a +2 to my battle die roll modifier, or my battle roll. So I get a +2, and basically I got to roll a modified result higher than the Army of the James to defeat it. Now it's already in its backmost position, but if I defeat it, he loses his initiative marker. So that would have been handy to do. An unmodified die roll of 1 is always a failure, and a 6 is always a success. So that's something also important to remember in this series. But as I couldn't do that, we do have to roll the dice to see if the Army of the James is going to do anything. So we roll a die, and our result was a 3, and so that means he's finished his action. He can't do anything. He just remains in place. Let's look at the different generals in the game. There are 8 Confederate generals in the game, and they have 2 sides to them. There's going to be 3 generals that are going to be in command of different military districts. So right now I actually have Robert E. Lee, who has got an activation rating of 1, which means you got to roll higher than a 1 to activate him on a square activation. So basically a 2 or higher, and he activates. He's also got a +2 rating for battle, which is very useful. So he is in command of the East, which will affect any battles in this particular zone. Okay. In the center, we have the commander who is in charge of the West, and right now that is Joe Johnston. He's got an activation rating of 3 and no battle rating. He will be able to command battles against anything in this dark gray band, so he's got a pretty wide area of responsibility. He activates on a 50-50 call. 4 or higher activates him. Finally, in the Mississippi, we have Albert Sidney Johnston. He's got an activation rating of 2, so he's easier to activate than the other Johnston, and he governs the Mississippi. So that will be battles in all of this tan area off to the west. Finally, there is a national military advisor on the board. Each of these generals has a reverse side to them. So this is Beauregard. On his reverse side, he's got a rating of 2. And that enables him to activate just like Albert Sidney Johnston. On his reverse side, when he's in this box, he activates on a 4 or better. So his rating is 3, so you got to roll higher than that. And what that is used for is located here. Whenever you want to do something involving Confederate command options on square activations, you're going to need to roll against that guy whenever you want to do resource placement, naval action, or a leadership shuffle, diversionary campaigns, commerce rating. There's a variety of things that you can do on here. Actually, I think diversional campaigns are up to the theater commanders. But war effort, diplomatic, morale test, all of that is going to depend on this guy. So he's got an important role to play. Now, it just so happens that right now I actually have the best generals in play. The 4 best generals are currently on the map serving in areas of responsibility. They can be bumped out by these I hate to call them losers, but these clowns. Bragg is the better of the lot. His battle rating of -1, I think it's a little unfair. He won important battles. He just didn't know what to do with them. Polk, I think, is also a little unfair, but it is what it is. Anyway, so all these guys have -1 battle ratings. They're harder to activate. You need a 5 or 6 to activate these 2 knuckleheads, and 4 better to activate Bragg. On the reverse side, it's not much better. I think these 2 are 4s. All of them are 4s. So none of these really do you much good in a national military advisor capacity. So that's the 3 guys in there. Now, there's going to be times when a leadership shuffle is demanded that forces you to take one of these guys out of play and shuffle in a random version of, a random general from that selection. And basically this guy would go back into the cup and one of these guys would come out and replace him. Now you can forestall it by doing a leadership shuffle command action where you can cause one of these guys to be removed permanently. You can also lose generals due to casualties in battle. That can also happen. So chances are pretty high you're going to see one of these guys, even if you have a dream setup like I happen to have at the present time. Now, there is one more knucklehead that we get, and that would be Mr. Hood. Hood is easy to activate, but he's not that great in battle. He's got a -1 rating. And again, to win battles, you have to roll higher than the number in red to the right of the front counters. So mostly that's going to be like a 3, sometimes it's a 4, other times it's an easy one like a 2. Further modifiers to help you out with that, you get a +1 modifier if you spend one of your available railroad markers. That will give you an advantage in battle too, to offset some of those guys. So that's how Bragg can win battles. And in the advanced game, Knoxville gives you an additional +1 when you spend one of those railroads, so a +2. Let's look at the resources here. We've got a number of resources available at the present. We have gunboats, which are a naval resource, as are the commerce raiders. Let's put these guys together. You'll need a naval action to put these guys into play. And how you put them into play is actually written on the back of the marker. So this guy here will help either the blockade track. If you're trying to gain resources, you have to roll against the blockade track placement. You can also use it for morale purposes. So when you put it into play, you can put it on either one of those tracks, and it's spent after you use it. If you were successful either in making your morale roll to enhance your morale or to gain a resource from the blockade track, then the marker goes back into the available resources. If you fail, it goes back into the selection cup with other random markers. As you can see, there's quite a few of them. Forts allow you to put it into a controlled space, and when the enemy goes in there, they don't get control of it right away. On their next activation, they have to roll higher than the value 2 in order to defeat that fort, and they don't move on from that space, in other words. So if we had a fort in Chattanooga, Army of the Cumberland moves in, he doesn't gain control of it yet. On his next go, if he rolls a 3 or higher, he defeats the fort, and then he dings you for the morale and controls the space. Railroads, as I said earlier, you just spend them out of this box as needed to gain a +1 modifier in battle. And in the West, you get railroads get a +1 die roll modifier when you control Knoxville. So, and I believe that is the case. All right, so those are there's one more I forgot to mention, torpedoes. These, you spend them to keep an army either from moving along a river or to keep the blockade marker from advancing. It's basically a way to block that. You just play it out of your available resources if you have one, and any marker with an X, once you spend it, it is gone permanently from play. If it doesn't have an X in the upper left-hand corner, it goes back into the selection cup. All right, let's work through one more card. All right, so this is King Cotton Shortage Affects British Textile Mills. Van Dorn at Holly Springs. We're going to change the command. We're going to place Halleck in command in the east and Nunn in the west for the Union. So McClellan is relieved of his duties as overall commander in Eastern Theater. That doesn't mean he's not in command of the Army of Potomac. It just means that Halleck has now replaced him in the capacity of theater commander. And then we're going to place a Nunn marker over in the west. So basically there's no more modifiers to any of the command actions for the Union in either the West or the Eastern theaters. So, and by the way, for the Union, East is the same as the Confederacy. West for the Union encompasses everything else on the map. So that I think I failed to mention that earlier. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to activate the Army of the Gulf, but it's not actively on the map, so we can ignore that automatic instruction. We're going to do a command instruction now for the Army of the Tennessee, which is located up there. He needs to roll a 2 or better, and there's a -1 modifier per the card. And he rolls a 5, which becomes a 4, and that's enough still to move him to Forts Henry and Donelson. There is no fort there. The forts have been taken. And since there is a tattered flag in that space, we do lose 1 morale. So back to starting morale levels. Next, we have the opportunity now to take our actions. Mississippi Raid. We're going to roll versus a land space. And let's target the Army of the Cumberland with that. Well, actually, we can't. It has to be in the Mississippi, so it's got to be the Army of the Tennessee, and basically a 5 or 6 will recall them back to the start space in Cairo. And we rolled a 5, so that is a success. Army of Tennessee moves back, and we regain morale. All right, next, command action, and I think it's time to deal with the Army of the Cumberland. So let's try to activate Johnston. All right, so for our 1 command option, I'm looking at Joe Johnston's rating of 3, and I could give him battle orders. I do have railroads in play to hit the Army of the Cumberland, but I'd like to hold on those railroads for maybe a bigger moment. I do also have a fort resource available. So if I were to successfully implement that, I'd have to roll against Beauregard. He's the national advisor. And so if I rolled against his rating of 3, which means I'm rating a 4 or better, then I could put those forts into Chattanooga, and then subsequently maybe I could get a successful raid roll against him and recall him all the way back to Louisville. And if he advances into Chattanooga, he doesn't necessarily hit me with the morale loss and all the attendant factors with that. So I'm actually kind of leaning in that direction. So I'm going to go ahead and roll. And I need like I said, 4, 5, or 6, and a roll of 6. So that will be a success for him. And let's go ahead and take the forts, put that in Chattanooga. That will be our command roll. Next, we have a diplomatic action. Now, to increase the diplomatic status of the Confederacy in Europe, you have to roll higher than the, basically I got to roll a 3 or, well, let's see, how does this work? Yeah, you got to roll higher than a 2 to get it into that box. So I got to roll a 3 or better to get it into that box. And you really want to get that. If you can get that, if you can get the recognition or military intervention, good things happen for you. So we're gonna. Oh, we rolled a 6 again. There he is. 6s are always successes. And so we're going to receive the envoys. That's good. Keep that train a-moving. And so that will then be the end of that card. So that gives you a pretty good sense of how this game, The Lost Cause, how this works. It's a great game because it gives you a real good strategic overall feel for the Civil War, albeit from the Confederate perspective. I'd love to see something like this from the Union perspective, but we'll see what comes of this in the future. Well, here is the final position, and I actually won as good of a victory as you can possibly win, as the Confederacy in The Lost Cause. Finished 1864. Really, my hopes were hinging on Lincoln losing the election, and I had basically just enough. Because of the Commerce Raiders, a 6 or better, or 6 or less on 2 dice would enable him to lose the election, and that is in fact what we rolled. I think if it had gone into 1865, I probably begin to lose the game because I was really under siege. The Mississippi was able to keep the Army of the Gulf because they got off to a really late start. They didn't really start pushing until 1863, but they were besieging New Orleans. They hadn't quite taken it. Army of Tennessee was besieging Vicksburg, hadn't taken it. Chattanooga fell, and so the drive on Atlanta should have continued, but they rolled poorly for activations. They rolled a couple 1s to activate, and that kept them from moving on to Atlanta. And so the Decatur strategic space is still in play because Kennesaw Mountain's still open. Knoxville space, we lost that because of the loss of Lexington, Bowling Green, Chattanooga, and Hanover in Virginia. And Shenandoah was overrun, so actually they should both be like that. The Army of the James and the Army of the Potomac. The Peninsula campaign was very narrowly successful. Lee was able to thwart that and was able to secure, through some 6s on the European recognition track. I rolled some 6s, which offsets the die roll modifier and is an automatic success. So we were able to get recognition from Europe. So if it had gone to 1865, that would have helped us somewhat. But really, I think the key is for Lincoln to lose the election because, boy, it was getting tough. And I was fortunate to get a couple broadsheet events happen just before the end, and so we didn't face quite as many challenges in 1864. There you go. That's the outcome. My thoughts on the game as a whole. This is an older title, copyright 2010 from Victory Point Games. I don't know how acquirable this game is. It's long out of print. I think it's a very good entry into the States of Siege series. It can be terribly frustrating to play it, but you got to remember you're playing as the Confederacy, and the title is aptly named, The Lost Cause. How winnable was this for the Confederacy? It really puts you into the mindset of Jefferson Davis, I think, and helps you to come to grips with the challenges that they were facing. It also tells the story of the American Civil War from both sides, although you're on the receiving end of the Union advances. It really does a great job of telling the story. There's, a card for each month, and just it does an excellent job. I highly recommend the advanced game. I think the advanced game is the most satisfying experience. Gives you the best picture of the overall conflict. In this last game, I had a lot of things go right for me early on that enabled me to survive a pretty tough year. 1863 was a pretty tough year for the Confederacy, and I was able to weather the storm more or less. The establishment of advanced bases at Shiloh and Corinth and at Chattanooga means that's as far back up the track as those armies will ever go. So the pressure on the Confederacy was getting pretty grim, and I had a number of morale sapping events take place. So the early morale gains that had me sitting at 11 for a while, we're very fortunate to have those, because that did help me to weather a pretty brutal string of unfortunate circumstances that caused that to drop down. Definitely recommend this one. It's probably one of the better, more sophisticated games in this particular series. So if you run across a copy, I'd say snag one.